And around 1 to 5% of that tourism is from Britain. If we want Egypt to remain stable and flourish, we do need to get Sharm el-Sheikh flights back as soon as we possibly can, and the work must be concluded quickly. And in assessing the security of resuming flights to Sharm el-Sheikh, obviously we must put the safety of our citizens first, but we should also consider the security implications of not resuming those flights. There are an awful lot of Egyptian people who are dependent on tourism. If those people are left jobless, feeling spurned by Britain, as many currently do, we have to look where those people will turn in order for a livelihood and security, and we do not want them turning to extremism. And the stakes are high. Economically, if Egypt crumbles and social disorder breaks out, the migrant crisis that we're currently fearing now and the effects for this summer on Europe will increase dramatically. Currency rates are artificially high, and floating the currency on the open market is a frightening and risky prospect for Egypt and is a leap of faith. But in making a leap of faith, everyone needs to feel they're surrounded by friends who are going to help them to do that. And socially, if we don't help Egypt modernise, social disorder will feed and nurture Daesh and all pro-Islamic State players. And we can do so much. We've got such a rich experience of democracy in helping form a parliament and functioning state institutions. Finally, education is vital, and the broken down education system in Egypt almost needs a complete revamp. This is something that Britain has excellent expertise and experience in. And as we all know, education and forging a future for young people is one of our key weapons in preventing young people from falling prey to the predatory natures of extremists and takfiri thinkers. And finally, if we're not proactive in forming this kind of relationship with Egypt, in helping it become the democratic nation it is trying hard to be, not perfectly, absolutely not perfectly, but is trying to be, there are other nations that will step into that gap. I'm not sure we particularly want Russia to step in, to be seen as the primary friend of Egypt. We need allies, and we need to support our allies in that region. Finally, on looking at the human rights abuses, which are appalling, we do need to make sure we're measuring very carefully what it is we're concerned about. If we are concerned about human beings and their suffering, the metric of our judgments and our actions on human rights abuses must be the number of people who are undergoing that suffering. And often, if you have a government or an institution, it's very easy to focus your blame on that locus of responsibility. Much less easy to blame a failed state because there's no one there to blame. But if it is human beings and their lives we're concerned about, we need to look at where the most human rights abuses take place, in a stable state or in a failed state.
Well,
and you cannot...
Forgive me, I think it's important, with respect to human rights abuses, to mention Giulia Regini, who lived, I believe, in your constituency as a research student. And in this case, I followed the case, and it seems difficult to see, to directly apportion blame, because you've got a government which is responsible for some abuses, but you've also got rogue elements within the security apparatus, because one thing that we haven't mentioned is the fact that the Egyptian military, if you like, is broadly involved in all sorts of ramifying branches of economic life and social life and business and all that sort of thing. So when people talk about the Egyptian government, that's a complicated notion.
Thank you very much. My honourable friend makes the case very, very eloquently indeed. And the more that we can help the Egyptian government stabilise itself, have more grip over its institutions, institutionally help, the more we can help the security service operate in a way that we like to see our security services operate in the West, so that security services and what happens can be aligned to the state, the more stable that country will be. But going back to my point I was making, just because it's harder to allocate blame in countries like Syria and Libya, and it's harder to solve the problem that is causing untold numbers of human rights abuses, we should not let the fact that there's a government under which human rights abuses are taking place detract us from tackling where the human rights abuses are happening on an abominable scale. It's very easy for us to put our own moral virtue in liking to blame someone ahead of our concern for actual human welfare. But just in concluding, I think my honourable friend has made a very powerful case for the need for stability in Egypt. We owe it to the Egyptian people, We owe it to British people who are concerned about stability, concerned about the migrant process. We owe it to all of Europe, and we owe it to everyone everywhere, whether they're moderate Muslims, Christians, anyone of any religion, not to sit and condemn and carp at a country that is certainly not doing everything well and certainly gives rise for much concern, but to help that country obliterate those things which cause us concern and to help one of the lone islands of stability, an attempt at democracy, and one of the few countries that has not succumbed to instability in an Islamic, takfiri, alarming state to thrive and flourish. And that's within the interests of all of us. Thank you.
Shannon.